Good morning to one and all present here for this post-draft panel discussion session organized by Vigyan Prasar on new science, technology, and innovation policy, open for public feedback till 31st January 2021. Vigyan Prasar is an autonomous organization of the Department of Science and Technology, actively engaged in science communication, popularization, and extension activities around the country. I, Kinkini Dasgupta Mishra, on behalf of Vigyan Prasar, extend a warm welcome to you all the delegates and audience present here for the discussion. It's my privilege to welcome the esteemed panelists of today's session, our lead speaker and architect of the new STI policy, Dr. Akilesh Gupta, advisor and head STIP Secretariat, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Our expert panelist, Dr. H.R. Bhojwani, former head Research Planning and Business Development, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Professor T. Abhinandanan, coordinator, professor at DST Center for Policy Research at IISc Bangalore, Professor C. Nirmala, coordinator, DST Center for Policy Research and professor at Punjab University, and Dr. Nakul Parashar, director, Vigyan Prasar. We all must agree that science, technology, and innovation are the key drivers for economic growth and human development. On 1st of January 2021, DST has released the draft of the 5th STI policy that aims to bring about profound changes through short-term, medium-term, and long-term mission mode projects. The new STI policy aspires to build a nurtured STI ecosystem that promotes research and innovation on the part of both individuals and organizations. The policy has been developed, prepared, and drafted on the basis of core principles of decentralized, evidence-informed, bottom-up, experts-driven, and inclusive. The policy is to identify and address the strengths and weaknesses of the Indian STI ecosystem to catalyze the socio-economic development of the country and also to make Indian STI ecosystem globally competitive. Today's panel discussion is organized especially for the young scientists and the researchers of the country. The highlights of today's discussion will be the open science, capacity development, research, innovation, technology development and indigenization, and industry-academia partnership. These are some of the major concerns of the scientific community. The discussion is carried out in 3 sessions. First, the overall view of the STI policy, the new STI policy will be elucidated by our keynote speaker, Dr. Akilesh Gupta, followed by key remarks by our expert panelists on the specific areas of the policy, and finally, the interaction session with the live audience. Today's session will be moderated by Amrita Mukherjee, Young Policy Professional of STIP Secretariat, DST. Thank you all for joining us. I now request Dr. Nakul Parashar, and I invite Dr. Nakul Parashar, Director Vigyan Prasar, for his introductory remarks, sir. Over to you, sir, for your welcome address. Thank you.
Namaskar, a very warm welcome to one and all. Respected Dr. Akilesh Gupta, Dr. H.R. Bhojwani, Professor T. Abhinandan, Professor Nirmala Chongtam, Ms. Kinkini Dasgupta Mishra, Ms. Amrita Mukherjee, and to everyone who's joined to listen to this important topic of new science and technology innovation policy, public consultation, a panel discussion with research scholars and young scientists. Today's topic talks about the STIP in promoting research and innovation in India. I'm glad. On behalf of Vigyan Prasar, I welcome one and all to this discussion and to this event today. Now, Ms. Kinkini Dasgupta Mishra has already spoken about what we are going to achieve and what we are going to hear from Dr. Akilesh Gupta, who is the architect of the new STIP policy and is also spearheading the entire initiative. We are glad to have you here with us, sir. And thank you so much for having accepted our invitation at the shortest period of time to enlighten us in this direction. Sir, all of us like me are very eager to hear about the new STIP, the draft, and many other points that you might think are important and are still not available with the people. So, without stepping between you and the audience that is eagerly awaiting to hear from you, I now request Kinkini ji and Amrita ji to take it forward from here. And once again, on behalf of Vigyan Prasar, I cordially welcome all of you to this event, and I'm sure we'll all benefit and be enlightened from these discussions. Thank you so much. Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yeah, Dr. Nakul Parashar. Now I request Amrita to take it forward.
Thank you, Kinkini. Thank you, Dr. Parashar, for the introduction. And without any further ado, let's jump right into the consultation. I would like to invite Dr. Akilesh Gupta, Head Advisor, DST. He's also the head of the STIP 2020 Secretariat, heads the PCPM and SPLICE divisions on the Climate Change Program, and is also the Chief Vigilance Officer. And beyond all his formal designations, he's the driving force for this policy design process and all members of the STIP Secretariat who have worked to make this policy possible. Dr. Gupta, over to you to talk more about the policy design process, stakeholder engagement patterns, and the way forward. Please, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Amrita, and Dr. Parashar, the distinguished panelist of this introduction, Dr. Kinkini, and everybody who is listening, watching this program, a very good morning. And I invite all of you to join this discussion, and you can post your questions, queries, comments, and thoughts that you have on this 2021 draft. Now that the draft is already in the public domain, I'm not going into much detail of this draft. What I'm going to present is some very salient points which will be relevant, and I would like those points to be, discussed here in detail, because actually the purpose of this discussion is to get the your ideas and also can and how we modify this draft to finalize it and for the final approval of the policy. We would like that these ideas to come, and we'd like to address them in a most transparent and inclusive way without having any inhibition for or against any idea that comes up. So we please be frank and be open to ask questions and give suggestion on any issue that you think important to include these draft. So may I request Kinkini kindly go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So this presentation I have divided into several parts, and I will talk about some introductory thing, and then I will straight away come to the recommendation and the overall vision and the post-draft consultation. Next slide. So if you look at this, you find that, and this is not to elaborate, but to mention that we have had 4 science and technology policies earlier, which were drafted, released after the independence. All these policies came at the time, in different time, and they all give focus on different circumstances that prevailed at that time. For example, Scientific Policy Resolution of 1958 came up when India has to go for igniting people and create, fostering and promote, and also develop the scientific temper among its citizens. That was the time when scientific institutions were at the very nascent stage, and therefore, and this policy was, it was totally driven from the top, written by Dr. Homi Bhabha and announced by then Prime Minister Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru in the Parliament. Then came 1983 Technology Policy Statement. This came again at a very crucial juncture when India had gone for first Pokhran experiment, and a number of Western world countries have denied India with technology access, especially the strategic technology access. And so it was on the call of this policy that India must become a self-reliant in technology and build the technology competence so that we can address the these sanctions that came at that time. Then came 2003 and 2013 science and technology policies, where again the focus were to, for example, 2003 policy had focused on connecting science and technology first together, and then connecting them to socio-economic sector. And similarly, the last policy, 2013 policy, had in fact introduced innovation as the major connecting point of science and technology. And this was the focus at that time. Can I go to next slide, please? So the this policy of 2021 that we are going to form is actually going to address some of the new things that we have. I think there is a slide prior to that. Did you miss that? Can you? Okay, I think we missed that. Okay, so this policy, as Dr. Kinkini already mentioned, that it is more inclusive, bottom-up, and evidence-driven, and therefore this is slightly different than the policy that we had set up earlier, where the focus is that we must create inclusiveness in policy formulation process and bring all possible stakeholders into the policy formulation. For the first time, this policy was, focused on the what is called creating connect with the state government and also with the line ministries. India, in fact, made several progress in the recent past. And if you look at that, India is now third in terms of number of publication, in terms of number of PhDs, again we are third, and number of startups also we are third position. So we made quite a good progress in recent time, but still we have so many gray areas. For example, we are still lagging behind the world West in terms of resident patent filing. We are 9th. Also, Global Innovation Index, we are 48, although we made progress from 81st in 2016 to now. I think we need, similarly, the women participation got double in last 6 years. But I think we need to do much more, because the women participation in R&D is still suboptimal, only 16%. I think you must take it forward to 30%. Next slide. So this, I think this is the slide I was saying that, this policy is bottom up and decentralized in this formulation, as well as in consultation also. Next. So this entire policy formulation process, in fact, was divided into 4 tracks. Each track focusing on different issues. For example, in track 1, we have extended early consultation, reaching out to every stakeholder for their ideas and thoughts on the science and technology. In fact, I will tell you, in some of the stakeholders were, in some cases, they were illiterate also. We reached out to the illiterate people. We reached out to the far area like northeast and even islands and so many places, so that we get the idea. Not necessary that people should be able to give us idea what should be the policy. But if you pose this question that what do you want science to do for you? I mean, this question, even illiterate can answer. What do you want science to do for you? And we got wonderful answers. And let me tell you, the entire experience of gathering those ideas was amazing. And this we thoroughly enjoyed that process. In entire team. Track 2 was the most top-down. All experts were involved into this. And they gave the idea. With that, we required the grace of the policy, how policy should be there. Track 3, as I said, for the first time, the ministries and states were involved into this thing. And also the Indian diaspora was consulted in the Track 3 part. Track 4 was a more ACEX level consultation, where the representative from most of the ministries, state government, the industry, even the young, institution, young organization, youth organizations, and all, so many of them were involved into Track 4. Next slide. So entire process, if you look, consultation process has been very, very extensive. More than 300 rounds of consultations were done. In fact, 9,000 people participated one-on-one. In 6 months' time, I personally had interaction with 9,000 plus people. And this was amazing experience where, in such a short, and thanks to COVID, this would not have been possible without having virtual platforms available. Physically, you can't meet 9,000 people in 6 months' time. This is impossible by any means, and you can't have 300 rounds of consultation. We had also extended consultations to 34,000 people, and we had set up a quiz where we got so much of input, and more than 1 lakh suggestions came to us directly for giving us idea and their thoughts about policy. Next. So in a way, this if you see that this policy has been the so far largest, widest, quickest, and most intense exercise that we did as a policy. In fact, more than 43,000 stakeholders were consulted. And our team and experts put together has spent something like 25,000 man and women hours. And this was an amazing exercise that was done. This is the first policy where states and Indian diaspora were consulted. I would say the women dominated this policy like anything. And so, in fact, right from the beginning of the process, we included equity in our, committees and the groups that discussed. 40% members were women in the thing. So, and also we had a good mix of young and old. We had younger expert level people as young as 25-year-old and as old as 85-year-old. So this was a good mix of young and old, and generally it is believed that policies are made by most experienced people. But I tell you, my own experience has been the kind of disruptive and great ideas that we got were largely from the young people. So that shows that India is rich with the ideas at the younger generation. And so, and I also always believe that when this policy is for next 10 years or so, the older people will not be relevant. I will not be there. So therefore, it is better that we consult the people who are going to be relevant after 10 years. Next slide. This is the young team that coordinated entire formulation process. And as I said, if you see all smiling faces here are all young people. And Amrita is one among them. She's here. So, the average age of this team is less than 30. And so you can imagine that, in fact, if you remove me, then average age will come down substantially because I'm the only person who is old here. See the next slide. So this policy have 11 chapters, and I will just highlight the salient feature of each chapter. Can you go to next slide, please? So if you see in the open sign, we have some big ideas put here. One big idea is that let's set up a national STI observatory, which is a central repository for all kind of data, document, outcome, which is generated from the STI ecosystem. So this will comprise of one Indian Science and Technology Archive of Research. So this will be a portal which will have, which will be given access to everybody. And that will have output from all publicly funded research in the country. Similarly, you will have the input mechanism where every researcher can deposit its outcome to this portal. The big idea which we are bringing out as a part of this open science is the one nation, one sufficient idea. This will be done. So many institutions in the country, they actually are subscribing to the journals, which are very expensive, and they have to pay from their, research money, research grant that they get. What this policy proposing is that instead of individual institutions paying to the, publication, group, let's pay from centrally negotiated terms by the government, and so that the burden on the individual will reduce. That is one. But more importantly, that right now only 3 lakh people are getting access to these journals which are there in the different organizations. With this, 1.3 billion people in the country can have this access without paying anything for this assistance. So this is a big idea that is coming. I don't know whether it will be acceptable afterward or not, but once if it is accepted by government and implemented, this will be the most, I would say, path-breaking recommendation not done by any country in the world. So India becomes the first country to implement this kind of big one nation, one sufficient model. Next slide. In the capacity development, we have some good ideas included. For example, we have so many frameworks for assessing the higher education performance, but we do not have a single research excellence framework in the country which assesses the research outcome of the higher. And this is the fundamental problem that our universities are competing with the world universities, because most of the international universities have research excellence rather than teaching excellence. While teaching is also very important, but creating a research excellence model will help Indian universities competing with the world universities. Also, the universities have one major lacunas, weakness, and that they do not have innovation into part of their curriculum. While the basic education level is quite reasonably high in most of the good universities, they lack innovation and entrepreneurship. I think we need that to added to the, and right from the early stage of education, this innovation need to be added. Also, transforming R&D institution into university is a big idea. So India has 7,000 plus R&D institutions. 50% and more are in the private sector. Now, these R&D institutions, they have everything in their campuses. They have the best R&D infrastructure, globally contiguous infrastructure, the high-level researcher, but they do not have the academic atmosphere. They can't award degrees, or they can't award PhD to with their own stamp. They have to depend on some other university. Idea is to convert each of these R&D institution into a department of a research university. There can be several such research universities which will have departments, these research institutions as departments. I think this idea is emerging, and we would like to take it forward. Next slide. The financing side, there are so many big ideas. For example, so far the state governments have not been participating in R&D in a big way. So they need to be brought under the hold of R&D, and that is a huge contribution, because there's a huge kind of potential that state governments have. I mentioned that there are 7,000 institutions, R&D institutions. 50% of them are in the government. Only 300 plus institutions are under the central government R&D ministries. A large number of R&D institutions exist in the state level and under the purview of the state government. These need to be, they have a less capacity right now in terms of their R&D infrastructure and everything. I think that's the time that they need to be brought in the fold of national STI ecosystem. So therefore, there is a role that state government can play in a big way in creating this thing. Also, there is a issue that industry is facing while collaborating with R&D institution and the academic institution. They need certain incentivization. We had discussion with the industry captains, and they need tax increment R&D based tax incentive. Also, we need a remodeling of patent box regime. I'm not going to elaborate, but I'm telling you, in 2016, Government of India brought a new model for filing the patent. India, as I said, we are 9th in terms of resident patent filing. I think we need to, do better. See, 70% of the India's patent is by non-resident, whereas 90% of the patent from China is by the resident patent. I think this is we need to. Why it is so? Because China brought some new incentive for the patentees. This policy includes that what kind of incentivization and relaxation of regulation will be required. One very important area I wanted to mention in the patent box is that we need an incentive from the infringement damages that patentees face. Similarly, the notional royalty from the sale of the product that is being manufactured through patent required to be added into this. Also, the connect between the R&D and academic institutions with the MSMEs and startup are very, very important. You know that India has 63 million MSMEs, and 98% of these MSMEs are micro enterprises. They are very, they are so kind of eager to have R&D connect. Right now, it is missing. So this policy encourages that connect through creating financial support system to these MSME. And how to it be created? It requires, and the MSMEs are very rich. You know, there is so much excitement that they have in terms of creating R&D and innovation. Connect with them. I think this is one area. Next slide. So also that, you know, this is another problem that the country faces. So the so-called public-private partnership, you know, is not getting successful because of the way the private sector and government operate. And there is I would say, the trust deficit between the private and government. Now, in order to bring that convergence and synergy, we need a corpus funding jointly operated, or rather, I would say independently operated, outside the government and private. So there is a scope for doing, and this has already been experimented by government in some big program. So it's not like, it is not a theoretical idea, it has already been implemented. Also that, you know, private sector and especially industry has been concerned about the stringent rules and regulations. For example, general finance rules are creating some constraint on them. How do we relax them? Again, this has been already experimented in a national mission on interdisciplinary cyber physical system. Already a kind of, this system has already been implemented, where the entire mission is industry led, and industry that implementation and monitoring of the mission is actually not supposed to follow the DFR in a strict way. And it has created its own system of implementation, and this has happened with the approval of the government. Next slide. In research area, one thing that all researchers, especially the young people, the students and the young scientists, have been demanding that government is too slow in processing their funding, and the release of money is very, very, not up to the mark. And many of the complaints that we receive, that the fellowship funds are not being released, or the research funds have not been released, and kind of that. And somewhere the government can say that, justify, oh, this is stuck there and that. But I think the researcher at large would like this easing out of this process. So there are a whole lot of recommendation that is there part of this thing. We would like, especially the young people, to give us more suggestion on this area, and we will go, very transparently and honestly, that we would like to look forward to have those suggestions on the younger people. Next slide. In the innovation entrepreneurship, that the area like traditional knowledge system and grassroots innovation have always been ignored by the formal R&D system. We would like that to connect to the education, research and innovation system. I have already talked about how university should set up the innovation centers. I think now time has come where the grassroots innovators are mostly in the informal sector. They need connect from researcher and then further connect to the market. This is totally missing. already 1,15,000 innovators, grassroots innovators have been registered as a part of the NIF system. But I think the number is much larger, and large number of these grassroots innovators are in the rural areas. So there is a need for connecting and also facilitating them by helping them in for going for registration, clearing the IPR, filing of patent. They are completely lacking in this area, and they are, in fact, some of them are not even educated. So they don't know how to file the patent and all. So that facilitation needs to be done by us. The right place is the local level institution which can facilitate. It cannot be done centrally everything. There is another space that is going to be available. See, and this is what I'm saying, the learning from COVID has been very, very useful. The incubation has made good progress. In fact, India is now third in terms of number of startups. But the issue is that now there is a need to scale up that number. We are number 3, but we are way behind China. I think that this policy is now creating a track for going ahead of other countries. Now that requires a lot of other big changes in the entire thinking of incubation. Here's the thought that we need to go for theme-based, distributed virtual incubation. So that we increase this number 10 times than today in number of startups and other things. Next slide. So technology development and nationalization, the key theme for this chapter is going for indigenous development of technology and technology indigenization. Both are important in the context of making India as the Atmanirbhar Bharat. And this is not a slogan, this is not a just a theme, but a whole lot of strategy needs to be put into action for going forward in this area. Next slide. So this is similarly, the strategic technology area is very important. I think already so much work is being done, but there are two disconnects of the strategic technology development. One disconnect is that university should participate in the strategic technology development, and the private sector must participate in developing these things. This is the direction that this policy is going. Another thing is that there is so much of spin-off technology coming out of this strategic development of technology, and where the civilian use can be, put into, there's so much civilian use is there. So startup that can set up as a part of the spin-off technology development is the one area which is very important. Next. Equity and inclusion is a very big area that we, and this policy is focusing. If you look at the policy, you find that it's not just a chapter in the policy, but this actually there is a subtext of the equity and inclusion in almost every chapter. There is a mention of equity. Because equity and inclusion must be mainstream with the entire STI ecosystem. We are in the proposing here that implementation of an India-centric equity and inclusion charter, which must address the discrimination in terms of gender, caste, geography, language, disability, and other exclusion. The women have been focused here. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have only 16% of the women in R&D. We need to make it to 30%. I think they deserve to be included in every, such decision making and the committees and other things wherever possible. They must represent by 30%. Also, the leadership issue in women. In fact, this is a big area. Not a single IIT so far has any women director. are they not competent or they don't deserve it? I think there is a need for a cultural change, and I'm not saying that going into the merit of the things, but I think it's more than the merit. It is the culture. These policies cannot give boost to this thing. They need to be there need to be a kind of cultural change that should come in the society, and the policy provides direction for that cultural change. I think next slide. So there is one issue which is very important, the ageism related issue, that some of the women, they had to take a break in their career, going for some reason like maternity leave or some other special reason. But when they join back, they lose a lot of time in their experience and other things. So here, what you are suggesting is that the women academic age should be considered, given more importance than their physical or biological age, and also the dual recruitment policy of some of the institutions is not up to the mark, and that need to be addressed. We need an institutional mechanism for women to get the justice in the institution. Next slide. I think science communication is another area that has been addressed in this policy in a big way. I think we need to create cross-disciplinary platform for science communication, because science communication, again, being considered as vertical in the government STI institution. I think we need to create this as a horizontal, that every institution must have a science communication wing with a dedicated science communicator leading that science communication. I think science cannot be kept in the labs and in the R&D space. It has to go to the level that it has to go to the level of going to the public, and education to the public is very much required. Next slide. So the new policy on scientific social responsibility is coming up, and this policy is in fact going to mandate certain role of scientists for going forward and communicating to the public. And so I think it's very, very important that scientists must become the science communicators. Next slide. So international STI engagement is very important. Now, in fact, we need to create a balance between the brain gain, that is scientists coming back from outside India, and brain circulation, that is scientists sitting in their diaspora but contributing to India in their own way. There is so much of issue regarding the fellowship and internship. Not just for the diaspora advantage, but also the level in there. So I think I'm sure many of you must be having concern about the fellowship and internship thing. See, India produces 25,000 PhD every year. Nearly half of these PhDs are not up to the good quality. But remaining, about 75% of them apply for postdoctoral fellowship outside India. And very few get. So only 20% of the total number get the PDF outside India. Rest all wait for their turn to come next year or so. India has limited opportunity for the PDF. We have really 1,000 PDF opportunity in the country. This needs to be increased, because then those who do not get opportunity to go out can get this opportunity in India. And PDF are the most productive, I would say, lot for the research. The number of research papers which come out from the PhD student and the faculty is much less compared to the number of research papers that come out from the postdoctoral fellows. They are the most productive lot, and therefore in India's research outcome will increase if we increase the number of PDF. So that's a very important. This is a study, not my study. It has been done by several researchers on this thing. I think I'll go forward for next slide. So now diplomacy for science must change, like, just not pursue SNT for diplomacy, but diplomacy for SNT is required. And we need to increase the number of science counselors. We have 4 counselors right now: Germany, Russia, Japan, and US. I think we need to multiply this number so that these counselors become India's representative to connect with the diaspora as well as with the rest of the people in their country. Now, we already set up a portal for Indian diaspora, but we need to have much more aggressive and much more involved engagement of diaspora with India. Next slide. I think in STI governance, we have set up we are proposing interministerial and interstate and center state mechanism. Also, the new National Research Foundation that is coming up. How do we connect the NRF with the research and innovation governance framework of the country is the challenge that we are going to see, and the policy talks about that. Lateral recruitment now will encourage that lateral recruitment in the government ministries, so that inbreeding can be discouraged and bright and new ideas emerge from outside the ministries. Next slide. Last slide. This is last chapter. Sorry, we're saying STI governance system. We are going to set up. Proposing here that a STI Policy Institute with data policy and policy research and policy advice system, connecting them with the state government as well as the ministries. Next slide. So overall vision is that India must be placed among the top 3 scientific superpowers in the world in the next decade. We must create a science for the people, and with the full-time equivalent researcher and the gross domestic expenditure and private sector contribution should be double. And we must create excellence in individual and institution to achieve the highest level of global recognition award. Next slide. So this policy is again unique in terms of several features. This is going to be a dynamic policy, which means we are not going to create this policy for 10 years, but rather this policy will be updated every alternate years. This will give us opportunity to keep, making this policy relevant to the changing situation. Also, it will give opportunity to stakeholders to keep suggesting us so that we can add later on and make this policy more, I would say, in dynamic in terms of its implementation. We are, for the first time, preparing the policy process framework document, where the entire, from beginning to end, whatever process has been done, has been work on this policy formulation and consultation will be captured. So today's discussion also going to be in the process document. This is going to be very detailed 300-page document. It gives everything. Also, for the first time, the policy is going to be supported or supplemented by a separate detailed document on policy implementation strategy. No, the policies fail because they have poor implementation strategy. The policy right now has more than 100 plus recommendations. Our team is working on creating the policy implementation strategy so that we can implement this inner thing. And for that, policy implementation cell need to be set up in the government. Next slide. I think that may be the last. So we are going to have the first draft consultation. We started on 21st Jan, going to end by 30th Jan, and this is an extensive, consultation process. The last date is 31st Jan for receiving the ideas. We already sent the draft to 82 Government of India, Department and Ministry, and 28 state and 8 union territories. I think I will end with this thing. I'm sorry I had taken a little longer time. Thank you very much for your patience hearing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for the detailed presentation. In fact, I've been looking at the questions that are pouring in from different social media platforms, and I think your presentation has actually gone ahead and answered so many of them. So thank you for the presentation. Right. Up next, we start with the panel discussion where we talk about different subjects of the policy with specific focus areas. So to begin this panel discussion, I would like to call Professor Abhinandanan, who is the coordinator, DST Center for Policy Research in IISc, and also the professor for Materials Engineering in IISc Bangalore, who is not just part of all of this, of course, he's been very instrumental in facilitating the creation of the STIP Secretariat. So Professor Abhi will talk to us about open science, higher education and research. So I'll hand it over to you, Professor Abhi.
Thank you, Amrita, for that very nice introduction. Are you all able to hear me? Excellent. Good morning to one and all. Well, good afternoon to one and all. So I would like to start by thanking Dr. Kinkini Dasgupta Mishra for inviting me to make a short presentation at this event. This is being organized by Vigyan Prasar, which is the flagship arm of the government in science communication. And therefore, I mean, this is truly an honor for me. A warm hello also to our lead speaker, Dr. Akilesh Gupta, and the director of Vigyan Prasar, Dr. Vigyan Prasar. Another warm hello to my fellow panelists, Professor Bhojwani and Professor Chongtam, and of course our moderator, Amrita Mukherjee. I would also like to acknowledge the tremendous effort by the team of DST STI Policy Fellows in organizing a large number of meetings of our thematic group, providing intellectual and research support to their proceedings, preparing reports on their recommendations, and so on and so forth. And as Amrita mentioned, many of them are a part of the DST CPR at IISc. And so because of this, I'm actually very proud of their contributions. I would like to acknowledge their contributions to this STIP process. So with these preliminary remarks, I want to move on to my remarks on what the draft STIP 2020 document has for those of us who are in the business of higher education and research. So by way of providing context, I mean, I think it's a good idea for us to start with these questions. What do higher education institutions want? More specifically, what kind of support do they expect from any policy document that will have an impact on their role and function in society, and indeed their role and function in the national imagination? So their concerns may broadly fall into a bunch of different buckets, but I want to focus on the following four. Number one is, of course, people. Number two is finance and funding. Number three is autonomy. And number four, access and outreach. I would like to say that all four of them are of roughly equal importance, even though I will be going through them one by one. So that is not based on the level of importance attached to them, but they're all roughly equal in importance. So on each of these four core concerns of higher education, STIP 2020 has some interesting proposals. And again, I will not be going through the proposals one by one. It is not going to be a listing of proposals, but rather an impressionistic view of what those proposals are and what they mean for us. So the first topic, of course, is people. And by this, we are basically talking about concerns that are related to the intellectual capabilities of the faculty members and students who are a part of the higher education system, and which means their prior training, their mindset, their attitude. And finally, one is also interested in their numbers, the sheer number of people who are going to be involved in this activity. So a large part of these concerns are really about education. So naturally, STIP 2020 refers to the National Education Policy, which was adopted by the government in 2020 on most of these matters. So it does have some proposals around the edges, but as far as the core concerns for higher education are concerned, it refers to the NEP 2020 document. So some of the things that are mentioned here, for example, it talks about creation of teaching learning centers for teachers at all levels to upgrade their skills. It talks about the importance of hands-on training. It talks about broad-basing Atal tinkering labs, and it talks about creation of innovation hubs in various places at the district level and so on. It also talks about encouraging the creation of research centers in various universities that focus on studying all aspects of higher education system. So the idea, I guess, is that this research that will be the output of these centers will create the kinds of ideas and inputs that policymakers need when they are assessing our system of higher education, basically universities and colleges, and how well they are functioning. STIP 2020 also has proposals to encourage the identification of talent at a very young age and nurturing all these young kids and shaping their interests so that many of them eventually choose science and technology as a career for them. The second topic, of course, is finance in my listing. And this is really key to ensure that all the intellectual wealth that is in our universities and colleges will get a chance to realize and reach their full potential. It pays for the livelihoods of all the people involved in this research enterprise in India. It pays for infrastructure that they need, buildings and labs, as well as expensive equipment such as NMR, electron microscopes, microelectronic fabrication units, and supercomputers. It also pays for all the laboratory chemicals, access to beam fans and facilities, internet connectivity, and so on and so forth. It pays, of course, for people to connect with each other through conferences, collaborations, and discussions. And of course, we are going through this pandemic, but once the pandemic is over, the importance of face-to-face communication through conferences will regain its importance, and it pays for those as well. And of course, it pays for very basic things such as power and water. So finance is a fairly important concern for all our higher education institutions. And STIP 2020, as Professor Dr. Akilesh Gupta has already mentioned, it has some interesting proposals in terms of finance, as well as financing mechanisms. So I just want to touch upon a couple of them. The document has a very interesting statement. It says it aims to double the government's share of the R&D pie in 5 years. And that's a rather strange statement, whereas in Dr. Gupta's presentation, it was clarified that it is actually doubling of the R&D pie across the board in 5 years. It involves expanding the R&D pie as well as expanding the number of people who are involved in R&D and so on and so forth. So I'm very glad to see that clarification in Dr. Gupta's presentation. It also proposes a certain percent of state government's finances to be devoted to R&D, and it has a variety of proposals and initiatives to encourage industrial firms, both Indian industries as well as MNCs, to enhance their own efforts in R&D, as well as to encourage their participation in collaborations with other institutions especially educational institutions. So again, it is something that is of interest to higher education and higher education institutions in the country. The third topic is autonomy. So we are talking about autonomy in academic, intellectual, and financial realm. And this has a fancy name these days, and Dr. Gupta did mention it. It goes by the name of ease of doing business. It is one part of it. In our case, I guess it is this autonomy that we are talking about refers to ease of doing research. This autonomy is what allows our faculty members to choose what they work on, whom they work with, the kinds of partnerships and long-term collaborations that they develop. And in each of them, they may want some help, but they want this help to come in with not strings attached. I mean, I wouldn't put it that way. Strings are fine, but strings that are flexible and stretchable, and so on. So it is important that we have to realize this. Researchers do not mind strings, but they just want them to be flexible and stretchable. The STIP 2020 document recognizes this, and that is why it proposes relaxing of GFR rules, for example, for certain kinds of projects. And it is not clear to me why this proposal is only for those strategic projects. There are already proposals in NEP 2020, for example, to assess the capabilities of institutions so that some trust can be developed and give them more and more autonomy in functional realm. And it is something that STIP 2020 may want to consider incorporating into its final version. STIP 2020 also talks about one seriously vexing concern that is important for all researchers, and that is stability of finances. And Dr. Gupta did mention that the release of funds is a major concern for people, and it has a statement seeks to address this issue. And finally, it is also about access to the knowledge produced in our institute. And a chapter, STIP 2020 has an entire devotion. It has a strong recommendation on one, not just academics in universities, but all scientific publications. It has an open access mandate by which publications and reports arising from publicly funded research will become available to the entire world. It has provisions that could help transform our institutional libraries that everybody can use, subject to certain caveats, but that is one of the major goals of this policy. It also has a separate chapter on science communication to important. Results available to people at large, where it is necessary, even make things available to people in hyperlocal venues. So having said all this, I mean, some things that I would like to touch up more. That India faces, and how the policy is going to promote India's efforts in meeting the current immediate challenges to arise in the coming decade. Self-reliance is an overarching goal, and that is a good central theme for the entire document. But I would like a clearer, and it is important that we talk about what our finest minds think about where the gaps are in specific areas, and how this policy is going to address in filling those gap. So the second one is, what kind of incentives and funding patterns work very well? I mean, we want a clearer articulation there as well. And more importantly, the kinds of things that really do not work. In STIP 2020, there are many proposals for new mechanisms, new frameworks, new institutional arrangements for various things. But there is not much about which ones are not really great and which ones deserve to be shut down. I'm not saying that, I mean, this is a fit topic for a policy document, but it could have an annexure which could talk about the criteria that would be used for junking, I mean, unviable things, so that we can all move on. Finally, NEP 2020 already has a very strong emphasis on the importance of humanities and social sciences in the curriculum at all levels, and on the benefits of interdisciplinary thinking. STIP 2020 differs to NEP on many matters, but it also emphasizes all those things that are critical for the success of our country in S&T, in the fields of science and technology. So I would really like STIP 2020 to reiterate those ideas and add a subsection on how such cross-disciplinary interactions will be promoted and encouraged. So with those few words, I would like to conclude my talk, and thank you all very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Abhinandanan, for your interventions. And in fact, like I've been saying over and over again, that the ideas about how financing is such a core part of how financing is such a core part of higher education and research, and there is need for a clearer articulation in terms of funding patterns, incentives, and that idea is actually something that the young scholars, early career researchers who are watching us right now, they're bringing it up over and over again. So we can only see how even your thinking is absolutely in tandem with that. And all these ideas of cross-disciplinary interactions, of articulation of the S&T challenges and gaps, they've all been well taken. And I'm sure as we revise the draft with all these consultations, they'll find a clearer space in the draft that eventually comes out. Thank you so much, Professor. Now I'll move to our next panelist, Dr. H.R. Bhojwani, who's the former head research planning and business development for Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR. And other than that, of course, in the context of this policy document, he was a core member of the Track 2 process, which was the intellectual push behind the policy formulation, where he headed a thematic group of policy and program linkages in the Track 2. So Dr. Bhojwani is going to specifically talk about funding ecosystem and technology indigenization in the context of STIP 2020. Dr. Bhojwani, over to you.
Yeah, friends, first of all, compliments to the Dr. Akilesh Gupta and his team for a very, very, very elaborate, STI policy. I had been associated with the formulation of the 3 earlier policies, not the 1948, but the rest 3. And this type of consultation has never been done in the history of Indian science and technology. I would say it has never been done globally as well. This is the first time that a STI policy is being framed with such wide consultation. Unbelievable. I think it would be going into the Guinness Book of Records in terms of the consultation. So my compliments to all of you who have, labored, belabored, and designed this particular policy. In terms of content, I think there is nothing that we could have added to it. It's absolutely, I think, marvelous. It's very comprehensive. It addresses all the aspects that one could think of. So my compliments to you. The 3 great or architectural unique things that have come up in this policy are in terms of, one, the National Science Observatory. This is a unique thing which has never been done anywhere, right? Then one mission, one, subscription for journals. And the third thing is open science. So these three things are unique in a sense, which have never been attempted or done anywhere else in the world. So this would create a precedence which is unique, which is unbelievable. Now coming back, ultimately we see today what is our R&D expenditure in terms of percentage of GDP. We have never exceeded 1%. And today it is hovering between 0.6 to 0.7% of the GDP. That is too low. We are seeking to increase this. But we are seeking to increase it. How are we seeking to increase it? We cannot increase it only by government allocation. The government allocation, while it has been increasing over the period of time in absolute numbers, has not even kept pace with the growth in GDP. The allotment or the allocation to R&D by the government totally has been less than the GDP growth rate. So we cannot depend only on the government. We have to now increase the private input or private contribution to the R&D. This has been attempted in the chapter on the financial sector. We see that, it has given all the textbook, items that can be possible in terms of, tax credits for commercialization of indigenous R&D, target-based tax incentives, innovation vouchers, seed grants, small business innovation grants. Yes, it is, itemized or listed all of these, mechanisms for increasing the private sector participation or trying to motivate. There's nothing on public-private partnership. The only way we can increase our contribution, financial contribution in the S&T sector is by having public-private partnership. We look at, Technology Development Board. The Technology Development Board was set up arising out of the 1983 policy. There is a 1% cess on import of technology, which is to go completely wholly to TDB. Over the period of 20 years since it was set up, not even 10% of the cess collected has gone to TDB. It is pitiable that we have not even spending 50 crores of TDB money every year on financing indigenous technology, commercialization. Now, how can we increase the private sector participation if this is the level of support that the government is giving? We had the, NIMITI program of the CSIR, right? It had certain aspirations. There's a new millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative. We had to develop technologies that would be the new technologies absolutely in the world, first in the world. That was technology leadership, world technology leadership. Whereas the aspirations that we are seeking in this policy, there is no aspiration that we have got. We are not aspiring to be something. Yes, we are content to be number 3. Why number 3? We are the largest country by population, or will be in a couple of years. So what are we competing with? We are competing with piddly little countries in Europe, who are a population of 60 million, Germany and UK and France and whatnot, Norway, Sweden. Are these the countries that we need to compete with or, compare ourselves with? We need to compare ourselves with countries who have got equivalent population or equation. Who are the countries that are there? Only China. And the next country is 300 million, 330 million, that is US. Where is our comparison? We can't compare ourselves to Norway and Singapore and Sweden. These are not the countries to compare with. We have to have our yardstick much higher than what it is today. next perhaps USA. Not even USA, it's 330 million population. What is it? 1/4 of us? With whom are we competing or collaborating? We need to talk about China. We need to focus and say, how are we going to compare with them? For this, we need to have aspiration. We need to set targets. We just can't escape with words. The only two targets that we have set in the policy are in terms of the number, number of publications, and saying that we will double our FTE and JERD and so on and so forth. We need to have more targets. What are we going to do in terms of industry? We must be number one in these industries. We have to develop science and technology to that level, or we have to say that our import content in these industries will be less than 10%, 20%, 30%. We have to set specific targets so that these are monitorable, and you can say, yes, science and technology has contributed to this one. And for this, your program on Admire is very good. That advanced missions on innovative research ecosystems, that's specific. This is exactly what we need. So we need specific the import content. This they didn't say in 1 year, they said it 10 years ago. In 10 years, they said we will reduce the import content in our industries to this figure in the next 10 years. We need these quantifiable numbers in terms of the policy that we can achieve in a time period. I'm not saying you define what time period it is. So this is my, submission to you, that we need to have an aspiration. This has to be an aspirational policy. This is the achievement that we are going to achieve. This is the targets that we are going to achieve, and not only in terms of words. Thank you. Right. Thank you, friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhojwani, for your interventions. Thank you for your kind remarks on the consultation process. And the ideas that you've discussed, especially about Admire and how there is a need for monitorable targets, quantifiable achievements, is something that has also been widely discussed within the consultations while the policy was being formulated in the post-draft consultations. And we are positive that as we revise the draft, these will find clearer articulation in the document. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Bhojwani. And for all the comments, suggestions, and questions that are pouring in across all our social media platforms, thank you, everyone. Please continue to send in your questions on the social media handles. Our social media moderators are collecting them, and we'll soon start our interactive question answer round. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to move to Professor Nirmala Chomtham, who is the coordinator for the DST CPR in Punjab University and is associated with the Department of Botany in Punjab University. Her work in bamboos is widely recognized, and she was appointed as the World Bamboo Ambassador from India by the World Bamboo Organization USA in 2015. She served as chair of the technical committee of the World Bamboo Congress held in Korea and Mexico, and is also the chair for the upcoming World Bamboo Congress to be held in Taiwan in September 2021. Very warm welcome, Professor Nirmala. And I'd like to invite you to discuss more about the ideas of industry-academia partnership and explore the many pathways in context of STIP 2020. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Amrita, and good afternoon to one and all. I would first like to thank Vigyan Prasar for inviting me as a panelist for this consultation. And I congratulate Dr. Gupta who is the architect of the STI policy, and he has and his whole team with such a wide circulation and involving so many persons from all regions, and even reaching out to the diaspora. And I've been knowing about their work because in our center we have a senior policy fellow who has Radhika. She has been working continuously, and I understand the amount of work which has gone to making this. And so congratulations, Dr. Gupta. And we have just heard about Dr. Abhinandan talking about the open science and higher education, and Dr. Bhojwani about complexities of the funding ecosystem. And being in the academic and research line, I will be just discussing some points of the STI policy in the research area. And I will be also talking about the research scholars and their way of the mindset, how changes are being I have been observed because I have been in this area for more than around 30 years. And so in chapter 4, 5, and 6, in chapter 4 of the STI policy, it focuses on expanding the science and technology system, enhancing the quality of research, and then engagement with stakeholders, and how to ease the research. And these, they are very focused. And there are some points I would discuss upon. So presently in the current century, the economic prosperity of the nation is associated with scientific and technological competence. And we all know that to achieve success in these parameters, it is imperative to have a very strong link between the academia and the industry. And in developed countries, these research partnerships between the industries and universities, they have increased considerably in the last 2 decades. But however, India has not utilized the full potential of the industry academia partnership because of some differences in vital differences which are there in the academia. There is let's just say there is less priority to the research, applied research, and also there is more, some do not want to leave the comfort zone of teaching, and there is a lot of innovation happening, but it does not reach the industry. And also the industry, they are not very, let us say, friendly, in that they think that the universities have a tunnel vision, and it is not, they do not reach out. There are so many reasons for this, why it is not being, there has not been a strong collaboration. And I would like to tell you also that how the research in the 30 years, when a researcher joins, how the mindsets have changed. Now, I think if you take 20 to 30 years back, there were more of researchers who joined with a real zeal to do. Now we are experienced that the researchers, they 20% maybe they are really come to research for doing something new, but mostly 80% of them, because they get a fellowship and then they are going to work, they are for a job or for degree. So I have seen the change in this last 80 years. And that sort of enthusiasm and heart and soul which goes into the research, this is declining. And Professor Gupta mentioned that he is very right in mentioning that innovation is it is essential to be set up during early education, how important innovation is, and then also the importance of IP, that is, it is a sort of also investment. So it has to be started in the early years when a child is going to school, college, and then the university. So this, I think, there is a major drawback. And also sometimes when the researchers come up with new ideas. Sometimes there's a clash. The researchers now just take what the supervisors say. So thinking is not so much broad as I have observed. And but the recent pandemic has taught us a lot of things. And in this chapter, there are areas where it is said that there is need to focus on priority sectors. That's very important, because during this pandemic, we have seen that there is a priority for food and healthcare, and it has come to the forefront. And the technology, and one very good thing in this policy is that the technology and innovative deliverables should have a strong foundation on basic science. This is what is lacking, because now when researchers, they do not really, they want to do lab work where they're handling instruments, and nobody now wants to go for a survey or for the field work, because I think this is very important. For example, in the pharma, there are a large number of plants where phytochemicals are extracted for drugs. So if you do not go out to survey in a particular area, you have to select the elite varieties, and then you have to screen them, and you have to compare, so that you can get that species which gives the maximum phytochemical that you want. So basic sciences is very important, and this is now students, they do not really want to go out from the laboratory. And then so agriculture, water, health, energy, and environment, these are the focus areas which are very important. And it has also mentioned that the research should not be only for academic achievement. Now what is being done, that because of the selection processes, because of the API system, now in the universities, we only look for publications, research publications, so that when they apply for a job, their API is calculated. Research should not be done only for the academic achievement, but for the social impact. The products, the processes, and the technology which you develop should have an impact and benefit for the society. Because I feel that, like as a professor, if I publish 200 papers, and then if the technology which I have developed does not reach the industry, then it is of really less easy. We get a lot of projects, we utilize the funds, and then if it is not given back to the society, I think it is unjustified. And what happens is that after that gets lost. So we should think of something which we can give back for the benefit. And maybe now there is a talk that there are startups where the faculty can also start their own small setups. That would be really good. And then the research also solutions should address different regions, socio-economic strata, including the rural problems of the country. So this is because India is so diverse. There is so much diversity, and the need of each state is different. So if the young researchers who are listening, I think you should focus on the requirements of your state. I'm from the northeast. I'm from Manipur. I know more about Manipur, but I won't know more about Kerala or Gujarat. So you pick up those types of the research which you can give back to your state. I just give you an example. When I did my PhD in genetics, I went for a postdoc. I did genetic engineering, biotechnology. Our team developed transgenic plant in virus-resistant plant in pea. But when I came, I thought that is it necessary to develop a virus-resistant pea? I feel that is not the requirement of the country or our state, because it is not. We are so rich in diversity. We can explore the unexplored, and find out. You try to mine the gems from them. So when I came back, I did not really continue with working with that, but I turned to bamboo because that is where I can help my society. And that is how, after that, after my PDF, I picked up and started working on health and the food, nutritional and health benefits of bamboo, because that is how we can help so many states. And it has come up well, because now we have drafted a bamboo policy with the help of the Ministry of Northeast. But the Niti Aayog is going to take up, because we will first focus on the Northeast, because that is where bamboos grow, and then it will be after that pilot project, it will go to different parts of the country. So I feel that that is good. We are going to, that is for the rural areas, and then farmers can grow now, because the bamboo has been taken out from the forest. There has been a change in the amendment. So these are things which you can do for your state. For example, those who are listening, maybe there are students from Uttarakhand. There is a plant, perilla, that is Banjira. There is a lot of hue and cry about olive oil, that it has omega-3, it is so rich. But if you compare between olive oil and this Banjira, you will find that it has 54% of omega-3, whereas the olive oil, it has about 10 or little. So the difference. But why we have never thought of looking at our genetic resources. We take up those plants. Why it is you can take up, and then if you market it, there has to be a lot of publicity. Of course, how has olive oil gone throughout the world? It is because they have worked hard for the marketing, and also it's not just like that. We have many resources which are better than what is already in the market. That also we have seen in our bamboo species. So I would tell the researchers that take up such research problems, which is good for your state. And sometimes we think that most of the scholars think that they should go outside and they should settle abroad. So that's not. You have done. This country has given you so much. You should do something for the society as well, for the country. So this is region different is socio-economic strata and rural problems of the country. So if our rural areas they start progressing, there will be not so much pressure on the cities, and we could be apart. This is one. And in the policy now, the government has floated programs to promote the industry and academia interactions, in which there is the industry-led R&D programs in proprietary sector will be encouraged through ADMIRE. So a program is coming up. This is Advanced Mission in Innovative Research and Ecosystem. This is good because it will have it will connect the industry and the academia through this program. And then there will be joint programs between the academia experts. And then there is also one research and innovation excellence frameworks. Here also there will be joint appointment across government, academia, and industry. So this is also good. And then the ease of doing research, also Dr. Gupta has already mentioned about that. I would like to add there, it would be very good if there can be special cells in the institutions, like in different countries. They have legal advisors, they have industries already coming up. So the researcher has just to do the work, and then they will be taken to the industry from there. And also, if there are some in the departments dedicated persons to address for the researchers because of all the administrative burden. So doing all this, it can lead to Atmanirbhar Bharat, which would be a joint cooperation between all. And we have just seen how in the COVID crisis, how the PPE kits, which were not available in the beginning, now India is exporting. So it is this chapter of research is quite inclusive and good, and just to mention that some special cells and hand-holding, it would lead more to facilitate the industry-academia partnership. So I think we have less time, so I'll end up with this.
Thank you so much for your inputs, Dr. Nirmala. It's really insightful to listen to what you said, especially the manner you connected your own personal journey in the field of science with what could act as a model, as a path for our young scholars, from early career researchers, and this idea of embedded research that is also addressing societal problems, that has some aspect of societal impact, is something that has also been widely discussed during the formulation of the policy. And I think, like you said, the chapter on research, capacity building is important. Yes, and I'm sure we can do more to make them clearer in the policy document. Thank you so much, Professor Nirmala. So from this, with this, we come to the end of our panel discussion. Now we move on into the section where Dr. Gupta and other panel experts answer questions that have been pouring in numbers from our young scholars, our researchers, questions that came in through registration earlier to the event and also during the event. So Dr. Gupta, I'll shoot them right at you and you can take them up one by one. So the one question which is we've got in an overwhelming number is a little more clarity in terms of the fact that STIP as a policy is covering such a diverse set of ideas. So what is the way forward for STIP in terms of implementation strategy?
Yeah, I think I did mention this that we are developing a implementation strategy document. What we did is that we are mapping all these recommendations into three categories: short, medium, and long term. There are some recommendations that need to be implemented within next 3 years. So they are the short, which they are high priority, and also that these are recommendations which need not only just priority, but they need to be implemented early. The second category would be medium term, which is 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 years, which also need urgency, but I think they can be implemented beyond 3 years. And then the last category, some long-term changes that need to be, that we call systemic changes, that need to be put into action, will go beyond, say, 6 years or so. So I think we are on the job, but let me mention here that this implementation strategy document cannot be finalized without having a wider consultation, because it requires many ministries, it requires many state governments to be included as a part of the discussion, and they are not only stakeholders, but some of them are the implementers. And therefore, without their involvement, this cannot be decided by the STIP Secretariat alone. And so there is so much that need to be done. I'm not saying that the document will be released, with the release of the policy. It will take some time, some more time. So first, our priority is to release the policy. Then we'll work on this strategy document, and then we'll release it after some time.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for the clarification. And so the next set of questions, so these are individual questions that have come from multiple people across multiple platforms that we have collated. So the next set of questions sort of revolve around the thematic area of open science. So a large number of queries have come in about what exactly will be the financing pattern for such a huge investment that is being envisaged through the One Nation, One Subscription policy and even the larger idea of open science that has been articulated in the STIP 2020 chapter, and how this policy specifically aims to sort of contextualize the principles such as the FAIR principle, which is there in the STIP 2020 document, to fit the Indian scenario?
Yeah, this is a good question that and definitely very important and relevant here. So let me start with the finance. So, if you have, it's not exact data is not available, but a rough estimate of the, the total amount of money that is being paid by institution to subscribe all the journals comes to annually rupees 1,500 crore. Let me tell you, this 1,500 crore
Is there a network issue at Dr.
is
Gupta's end?
not all the journals at all the institutions. So there are institutions which subscribe only select number. So the excess 100 crore, 1 or 2 lakh. The problem is that neither, so much money we spend, but still the access is to only select people. What about the researchers sitting at a remote corner of the country? What about the researchers who are doing on their own? What about the innovators and the researchers who are not connected with the institution? I think we have much large, and then private institution. Let me clarify this point because many people have asked this question, whether the private institution people will have access or not. I am saying this access will be available to each and every citizen of the country. So it is not government alone. Right now, the access is only to the government people, and that too spending such a huge amount. Total money that might be required to, to be paid as part of the negotiation for providing universal access will definitely be more than what we are paying. There's no doubt about it. But the kind of multiple access that we are now proposing through this mechanism will be several thousand times or several 10,000 times more than what we have. So therefore, our purpose is not to reduce the money that we pay. Our purpose is to create a democratization of the science so that it is available to every citizen of the country without they pay for it. So this is so data is a new water. It says that it is a new water. So this data is going to be as a part of the democratic process government is proposing to make available to everybody.
Thank you, Dr.
The other issues, I think I have only answered in my presentation, so I don't want to go into that.
Definitely, Dr. Gupta. Thank you. And in fact, taking from this answer that you just gave is our next set of questions, which sort of looks at the broader themes of education and research and R&D in India in the STI domain. So the question is that when the STIP 2020 has set out, in fact, we have said on multiple occasions that it set out to democratize science in India. There are a number of queries that talk about how can we make universities the epicenter for research and development in India, and how can research agenda or priority setting be developed by ministries or funding bodies in collaboration with universities. So what are the pathways that can be explored for such collaboration? And along with this, there are a number of new institutions that have been recommended for building these pathways. So how does that sort of address the current lack of uniformity that exists in the STI institutional domain, at least?
So I think this is a very complex system. Let me dwell upon it in detail so that can clarify. 70% of the government extramural funding goes to universities in the country. 70%. But the interesting part is that the innovation fund are very limitedly goes to the university. Most of the innovation fund are going to IITs and ISC and the other institutions or the R&D institutions. So this is the major problem, which means that university remain disconnected from the innovation, and even the the funding is not being sought after. I mean, it's not just the DST is not ready to give; it's not being sought by them. So this is one area. So therefore, university must work for the innovation, and they should also be competitive with the rest of the national institution of importance like IITs and all. The other issue is that traditionally universities have been working at a lower TRL level, which means technology readiness level, hardly 2 or 3 levels. So what is important is that they continue to work on a disciplinary area. Physics, mathematics, chemistry, they do research discipline-wise, and multidisciplinary research is not in practice in the IIT, in the university. Time has, in fact, this is what has been very seriously emphasized by the National Education Policy, that we must create multidisciplinary right from the beginning. And that's why if you see the National Education Policy, they are saying right from the class, say, 6, 7, 8, the disciplines will not exist. It's not that people are working only for science or commerce or art. They can work, any student who is this, who wants to say who goes to 10th class or 9th class can choose any other subject, art, this humanity, social sciences. Now, this is important that the university should also get into the multidisciplinary research. Interdisciplinarity is now increasing, and it's no longer physics, chemistry, and mathematics. So this is the one disconnect that university have. We have focused this in a big way. So as I said, two things. Innovation is not the key area of working, and multidisciplinary is another area where the universities are lacking. Our university, they create innovation centers, or the say what you call it, the science park, research park. See, if you look at the IITs, they are going for setting up research park. Research parks are what? Research parks create convergence of science, technology, innovation, and market. Now, this kind of science park concept must also penetrate into university system. And so actually, if you look at this, and the purpose of the National Research Foundation is to address the state universities and state institutions. They need to be focused in order to create a big, strong ecosystem in the country in science and technology. I think a lot of that can be done through university system, where there is presently we have the weak point. Thank you. I think this is what I want to say.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. In fact, what you've done is also answered the next two questions that I had for you by talking about NRF and such. So I'll move on to the next question, which is something that you talked about at length, and also Professor Nirmala talked about at length, is when we talk about forging successful industry-academia partnerships, what would you consider are the key impediments that currently exist in the ecosystem in terms of these? Like, what is limiting these partnerships currently? And what do you think the kind of incentives that could be made available for both industry and academia to undertake such collaborative STI research projects? And there are a number of existing institutions which already sort of do that. So how do we strengthen those labs and institutions and link them better with the private sector?
So I will start from where I talked in the last question answer. See, the problem is that, suppose the universities or the other academic institutions, they produce a lot of good research. So research is like, you do a discovery science. And so very nicely it is published in Good Impact Factor Journal and all. Technology-led research end up in creating technologies. Where is the taker? Who will take this technology? Suppose you manufacture, and just give you an example. Suppose you manufacture a ventilator. And in the international, several IITs have set up, R&D on ventilators. You create a ventilator. But then how that ventilator will go to the market? You need industry. You can't do it at your end. So what you need is a industry partner who is not only participating in the R&D and working for the prototype and going beyond, also taking that product to the market level. Now this connection has been missing. Some of the IITs did work on this. So as I mentioned in the beginning, universities are working at low TRL level. That means university work for the discovery science, and maybe prototype level they go, but do not have any mechanism to go beyond that. I think universities and IITs and ISTs, they need to work on it. How do we create this thing? Industry is ready to work with the academia. Academia also wants to work with the problem is, as I said, the word I said, the trust deficit. Trust deficit is the main issue. That industry, when they approach academia, most of the people think this is like, they all worry about how government can give money to the industry for partnership. When industry comes to government, always industry feel government is, so much of corruption in government, they delay the process, so industry wants speed in taking this forward. Government wants the money should be safe and not being siphoned away by the private. Now the lack of trust can be bridged, can be addressed by various. That is why if you see the policy, there are several recommendations. I think Dr. Bhojwani mentioned about one, that is admire. Admire creates bridging. How do you create a trust between government and private? Similarly, the STI bank idea that, create a corpus. Let this corpus be independent of government, independent of private. We position at some place and use by every industry is not worried about the small level innovation and small level R&D. They are looking for the big innovation which make bigger dent, and that they need to work with the government and academia in partnership on a longer term, not case by case. So this policy is addressing those concerns very, very strongly, and we will be very happy if there are good ideas coming from the audience on this. How do we take it forward? But we had deliberated at length on this issue.
Can I add something here? Just to what Dr. Gupta has just said, the introduction of this collaboration in industry and academia, with where the financial resources, risk and benefit will be shared. Just Dr. Gupta mentioned advanced mission and innovative research ecosystem that will probably strengthen the academia industry partnership, and also another research and innovation excellence framework. This is another also which is being introduced where there will be joint appointments across government, academia, and industry. So these things I feel that they could just and strengthen and enhance the gap or bridge the gap. And Dr. Gupta, you mentioned about the increase of PDF in India. I think that is also a very important point, because the research scholars, when they join for their PhD, they complete, and because of constraint they look for a job. Whereas in Germany, where I did my postdoc, their PDFs, they continue, the research scholar goes and then the work is stopped. But if there is he is given a PDF, he will not have the stress of completing a research work and submitting thesis. He can work more with an open mind. And there they have my mentor there, he had 2 PDFs, and the PDFs could also apply for projects, and also they could guide PhD scholars. So I think that is a way of continuing the research goes. And in India, what happens once it is the research scholar submits the work he has done for 3 years, that stopped. To continue further, to go to the industry level, that would require more, because he would work with a better perspective. So the increase of PDFs, that would be also a very good for making the academia industry much more strength to be. Let it be strengthened in that way also, I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta and Professor Nirmala, for the answer. Dr. Gupta, do you think you will have time for one more question on a subject that's really close to your heart and the policy team's heart, which is equity and inclusion? A very pertinent question that has come up, and this idea has also been widely debated and deliberated upon within the STIP team, is how does the policy look at contextualizing ideas such as of the Athena Swan Charter in the Indian context and implement the equity and inclusion chapter, given that there are certain limits we face in terms of outlooks and societal stereotypes that continue to exist in Indian society. So how are we thinking of that implementation?
Yeah, thank you, Amrita. This is a very important issue. In fact, let's admit that we are male-dominated society. And this is not that, in just one field. We are, this dominance is there in every field. But what is required is that I think we should not have any dominance. We should provide, rather the equal right. So there is a difference between providing dominance and there is a providing equal right and opportunities. This policy, this chapter is addressing the issue of providing the equal opportunity. Now, equal means, it does not mean 50-50. Equal means that let's create a level up, from a number that we are seeing today to a next level of number. How do we do it? Now, it's not, nobody stop, having recruitment of women or promotion of or inclusion in the, you see. But, it just does not occur to people that they need to address this issue. I think I am also, I've been caught up, in government level, so many important positions, and also, so I always feel whenever we come to, we need to set up a committee, immediate, names that come are male names. But that vice chancellor, this director, and this thing, and never we think that we should include a woman on this thing. I think we need to think about that thing. Some people argue, and this is a very common argument, that we don't have competent women to be included as a part of the committee. But how do you assess the competence? So it is like a chicken and egg problem. So unless you give opportunity, you don't develop the competence. And therefore, so I think what cannot be done through any law and rules can be done by bringing a cultural change. Why not, have a culture of thinking about women first? So if you are going to set up a committee, first think about the women. Who could be part of this committee? This Ethnothon Charter in UK is their charter. It is a British charter. We don't want to copy that charter. Indian conditions are different than the condition in the UK and Australia. We need to create our own charter. How do we create that charter? We had to see the circumstances in which we work and the condition that we follow. I think this policy is addressing those issues in a big way. We need to create an institutional mechanism that ensures the equality. It cannot be done just by statements. It has to be done through an institutional mechanism, and that's why this policy talks about so many institutional mechanisms. So I can keep talking about this issue because it's very close to my heart, but I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for talking about it. And for someone who's been working on the policy document with you under your mentorship, equity and inclusion has been such a big part of all our discussions and conversations. Thank you for that answer. And with this, we come to the close of our post-draft consultation organized by Vigyan Prasar. And before I hand it over to Kinkini for the vote of thanks, I would like to give a big thank you to all our social media moderators who looked at the hundreds of questions and comments coming in. Dr. Nidhi, Prabhatji, Tushaji, and Pooja Ghosh, thank you so much for curating it and making it easier for us moderators and panelists on screen. Kinkini, please take over.
Yeah, thank you, Amrita. Thank you all for joining us in this post-draft consultation of STI policy with research scholars and young scientists. I, on behalf of Vigyan Prasar and on my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to respected Dr. Akilesh Gupta for taking time out from his preoccupied schedule and raise the discussion by exposing us with the formulations and detailed process of policy drafting and its key points. Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation and responding to the questions. I express my sincere gratitude to Professor T. Abhinandanan, Dr. H.R. Bhojwani, Professor C. Nirmala for sharing your inputs, opinion, and views on the specific aspects of the policy. Thank you for your gracious presence. I'm sure the deliberations has helped our audience in better understanding of the policy. And I extend my sincere thanks to Director Vigyan Prasar, Dr. Nakul Parashar, for supporting and motivating us in organizing this discussion. And I would also like to acknowledge our gratitude to Ms. Amrita Mukherjee for her seamless, successful moderation of the discussion. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record my hearty thanks to DST STIP Secretariat for their enormous cooperation in organizing this event. And my special thanks to the audience, without which this session holds no value. We have received overwhelming responses to this discussion, received a lot of questions and some suggestions. We will compile this and send them to the STIP Secretariat. We encourage you to send in your feedback, comments, and suggestions to india-stip@gov.in, which is open till 31st January. Finally, I thank the entire team of ISTI portal in Vigyan Prasar for the perfect logistic support and backend management. Thank you, everyone. On this note, we close today's discussion. Thank you once again. Namaskar. Thank you.